It's no secret that producers love to cash in on horror movies. They'll make sequel after sequel after sequel, each with less original ideas than the one before it. The budgets get smaller, the actors less recognizable, the scripts less sensical. This series of diminishing returns is explained away by economic thrift and the promise of easy money. Unfortunately, this means that a lot of really fun, original ideas get really slapdash sequels. Just throw a couple more bodies in there, add a couple extra jump scares. Did we add enough bikini babes? These seem to be the guiding principles to cheap horror sequels. Forget about making a cohesive universe with consistent storylines and rules. Let's just resurrect that familiar face one more time because the audience recognizes it. Nothing is a safer bet than a recognizable icon on the poster. I'm not saying that all sequels are bad though. There are some fantastic ones out there that expand on the original idea while adding more to the mix. Aliens, The Evil Dead 2, Texas Chainsaw 2, these are all serviceable sequels. However, unless the original creatives or some really big fans of the original work retain control, it's likely that within a sequel or two, the magic will be gone. Hello horror heads and welcome back to the Scariest channel on YouTube, Top 5 Scary Videos. I'm your horror host, Keegan Hughes, and today we're taking a look at the top 5 scary movies with terrible sequels. Grab some popcorn and maybe some M&Ms because these snacks are most definitely the most enjoyable part of these misadventures in movie making. Before we begin, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe if you want more sequel action. Let's get started. Starting off our list at number 5, Troll 2. Let's get this out of the way. Troll 2 is not about trolls, it's about goblins. There is no Troll 1. There is a movie called Troll, but it has nothing to do with Troll 2. This might make you think that Troll 2 isn't a real sequel, but boy did they try to convince the public that it was. Yes, Nilbog is indeed goblin backwards. No, you don't need a prophecy delivering grandpa to warn you about that. Alright, Troll 2 is one of those movies that everyone has seen bits and pieces of thanks to how singularly ridiculous it is. There's that famous clip of the bespectacled doofus screaming out, "They're eating her! And then they're gonna eat me! Oh my god!" That was the fly also jumping on his head. There's also a scene where young Joshua jumps on the table and urinates all over a feast to prevent his family from eating goblin food. And there's even the legendarily corny popcorn sex scene where a shape-shifting swamp woman seduces a young lad before using a corn of cob as a makeout enhancer. Yes, the lad drowns in popcorn, but hey, what better way to go out, right? Cob in mouth, babe in hand. The best way to describe the plot of this movie, I mean if you can even call it a plot, is that a family decides to take a house swapping vacation and head out to the boonies. Once in the very rural town of Nilbog, young Joshua finds out that all the inhabitants are vegetarian goblins trying to feed them poisoned food so they turn into plants and can be consumed. The goblins are eventually defeated through strategic deployment of a double-decker bologna sandwich. It's top-notch stuff here, folks. Behind this flick is a troubled production where the studio wanted to cash in quick on a poorly made monster movie. Instead of letting it stand on its own, they build it as a sequel to the recently produced Troll. With a non-English speaking Italian crew and a non-Italian speaking English cast, this was destined to crash and burn. Even the folks involved with the production knew they were making a garbage movie. The acting, directing, writing, special effects, you name it. All baloney. Plus, as some extra fondant on this cardboard cake, there are 2 different, unconnected sequels, both known as Troll 3. Yep, 2 separate, unrelated movies billed as sequels to this one. So in the end, Troll, the original, has 3 sequels, 2 with the same title, and none having anything to do with each other. That is a special designation. Coming in at number 4, Paranormal Activity 4. You could really tell they were running out of ideas about what to do with this series. The first Paranormal Activity was a tight-paced, well-shot, refreshing low-budget horror flick. But after 3 majorly successful outings at the box office, the folks over at Universal could basically just make anything, slap the Paranormal Activity title on it, and make hundreds of millions of dollars. Which is exactly what they did. Loosely connected to the plot of Paranormal Activity 2, we get a lovely recap of the events of that movie. It's a strange choice going back and forth between 2 and 4 for the connection, but I'll allow it. So we meet Alex, our lovable teen protagonist who is always carrying around her video camera, and it's always on, of course. So she starts to notice some weird stuff after her family takes in the creepy neighbor child, Robbie. But do her parents believe a single word coming out of her mouth? Of course not, silly teens. Her boyfriend gets in on the suspicion when he accidentally records out of her laptop camera and sees Robbie getting up to no good in the nighttime hours. There's even a point where they use an Xbox Kinect to deliver some of the found footage action. Microsoft, Paycheck, please. Most of the movie is a cheap jump scare followed by shaky handheld footage mysteriously disappearing whenever it's convenient, and it gets old pretty fast. The filmmakers don't really do much to expand on the lore of the universe and instead opts to introduce a partially explained twist near the end. I actually found an interview with MTV where one of the directors claims that the twist went unexplained because it should be material explored in another movie. So yeah, they're just looking for more sequel money at this point. At least they changed their approach for the marked ones in the ghost dimension. Coming in at number 3, we've got Hellraiser Revelations. Before I talk about this movie, I must ask, why does Pinhead look like that? He's like, kinda got like a chubby baby face thing going down. Just why? Okay, I know why. It's because this movie was put together in 2 weeks as part of a contract obligation in order to retain the rights to the series. Boo. It was actually so quickly thrown together that Doug Bradley, the original Pinhead, declined to partake. Yikes. So yeah, Dimension Films didn't want the rights to revert back to Clive Barker, and in order to prevent that from happening, they made what is essentially a straight-to-DVD Hellraiser with essentially 3 locations. Low budget is one thing, but this thing was shot like a soap opera. There's even a found footage section shoehorned in just to add a little bit more of that rough around the edges charm. The premise is 2 teenage boys running off to Mexico for a week of sleazy fun. It starts off innocently enough, or at least as innocently as an underage binge drink south of the border can be, and culminates in some dead sex workers and the discovery of the famous puzzle box. The 2 teens and the puzzle box make it home in more than one piece, and soon enough the living room is full of Cenobites. You happy now? It does hit on the classic Hellraiser themes like sexual and violent taboos. There's even a little bit of implied incest, which is enough to raise a few eyebrows. But in the end, Revelations just seems rushed and cheap. And I mean, it's both of those things, so I would say that's a fair assessment. Coming in at number 2, Leprechaun 4 in Space. There are 8 Leprechaun movies to date. 1, 2, 3, 4 In the Hood, Back to the Hood, Origins, and Returns. What can I say? Warwick Davis puts in work. If I'm being totally honest, even the very first Leprechaun was mediocre at best. Fun and schlocky, sure, but these aren't bids for formative horror classics in any way, shape, or form. I actually watched the original Leprechaun at double speed once and enjoyed it way more than the regular speed. Got through it twice as fast, too. So when I say that Leprechaun 4 in Space is the worst of the bunch, it doesn't mean that it's really set apart very much, but the premise is so classically lukewarm and the jokes just don't seem to land like they do in the others. So we find the Leprechaun out in deep space attempting to get intimate with a sexy space princess. How does he get to space, you might ask? It doesn't matter, keep watching. So this space princess wants the Leprechaun's jewels. No, not those jewels. And he wants her riches. But before any of this can play out too extensively, a bunch of space marines show up and kill the Leprechaun for plot reasons. One of the marines pees on the Leprechaun's corpse, allowing the Leprechaun to send his soul up through the stream and infect the poor guy's member with space gonorrhea. And that's just the beginning. What happens next is just a string of classic lazy space sequel story events with plenty of softcore Skinamax elements just to pad out the runtime. Unsurprisingly, Leprechaun 4 earned a whopping 0% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, but not that you should ever trust a review aggregator for horror film ratings. But yeah, it's that big of a mess. And finally, number 1, Silent Night, Deadly Night 2. This one is barely a sequel. 40 of the 90 total minutes of this festive horror's runtime is just archived footage from the first movie. It is all flashbacks. Honestly, if you haven't seen the first, it might be worth it just to watch number 2 for that highlight reel plus a little new footage. At least you get to see someone get impaled on reindeer antlers. We begin by meeting Ricky Caldwell, the younger brother of Billy from the first movie. He's speaking with a psychiatrist about all the Santa-related trauma he experienced and how it sets off his murderous rage. Eric Freeman gives one of the most unhinged, overly enthusiastic performances of all time as Ricky the gun-toting maniac. In fact, this birthed another incredible gem of a meme. Garbage Day! Masterful, masterful stuff. This is a movie that really has no business existing, but it was brought to life by some producers looking to make a quick buck. The first Silent Night, Deadly Night was pulled from theaters after 2 weeks because a multitude of protests against its detestable content. Hard to imagine, but folks were none too happy about a movie featuring a murderous Santa Claus attacking children. So the original didn't get a fair chance to fully cash in. Eventually it was released on home video and became a cult hit, so of course a sequel had to happen. But not a full sequel with all new footage. No, that would cost way too much. So they got one of the editors to re-edit the old footage into a new movie and shot around 40 minutes of new stuff to fill it out. And that's how we got this wonderland of movie magic that is Silent Night, Deadly Night 2. It also helps that the poster is just incredible. It's just a gun and a Christmas ornament. What I wouldn't give to pick the brains of the producers behind this one. That's a whole lot of schlock, huh? I love it, but it also hurts a little. Not everyone can come up with classics, but at least some of them have heart, sort of. What do you think? There are a whole lot of other horror sequels that could have easily made this list. Which ones would you pick? Let me know down in the comments. Speaking of comments, let's have a look at some of your more scandalous ones from last time. Robert the Dude says, swamps are only dangerous when you disturb their holy protector, Shrek. I ain't the sharpest tool in the shed, but if I disturbed the great swamp protector, I'd hit the ground running. Game on. Keep Maine Weird says, there's some incredible stories about swamps in New England. Everyone should look up the Bridgewater Triangle to see what I mean. Thanks for the suggestion. Looks like I've got some swamp plans for the weekend now. Jexter says, Keegan, buddy, I love you, but please never attempt a Scottish accent ever again. I did my best, okay? All I want to do is channel the Canadian icon Mike Myers and all of his accent powers. Ox the Undead 666 says, swamps. Heart. This comment would make a great tattoo. Who's gonna get one? And Prep For It says, I laugh at all the people too stupid to learn the metric system. We shouldn't make fun of them, we should educate them. Show them the light that is a rational, proportional measurement system. And that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.